invite people to do whatever technique you feel is appropriate right now or that you gain value from. For those of you just joining us, we're sitting in silence for a few minutes. Give everyone the time to get on the call. Again, we're sitting in silence for just a few minutes here. I invite you to engage in whatever technique feels appropriate to you right now. So welcome, everybody. I want to say at the start here, I invite you to keep a dual awareness going, which is to be aware of your breath or your body or some other object of mindfulness during the talking, during the lecture part of this presentation. The subject matter is combining using our brains, using our minds to deal with concepts while at the same time having some sort of spaciousness or kind-hearted broad-mindedness while doing that. So I invite you to have that spaciousness in the body, in the breath, while I talk. Remember when I lived at Zen monasteries during the Dharma talks, the invitation was both listen to the words, understand the concepts, but also be aware of how the words resonated in our body. What did they open? What did they close? Where did we feel sensations? And to sit with those sensations. So something to consider. My name is Adam Coots. I've was first introduced to the teachings of Shinzen Young about 30 years ago, and I've been meditating daily ever since. They were immediately compelling to me. He was teaching at that time what he now calls feel all. I've lived in monasteries for about 4 years when I was younger and sat about 80 retreats, including many with Shinzen. If you read my biography that just went up and that I was feeling proud of, it states I've taught 8-week classes, I've taught in corporations, jails, and schools, I've taught webinars and YouTube videos, I've had weekly sitting groups, one-on-one coaching clients, and massive mindfulness events at the Burning Man Festival, which are great fun to teach. My teachings informed by my time mostly Zen, but also Theravada and Vipassana Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, Western psychology, Western philosophy, and my years as a participant and teacher in authentic relating communities. I've also been a data programmer for 25 years, and I have a full-time job right now. Last week, I was busting butt to get some numbers to our Public Utilities Commission. I work for a utility. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing in this program is based on my personal experimentation for the past 25 years. How can I stay a conscious person? How can I stay a sane person while sitting at a computer 40 hours a week? The undulation between going and sitting retreats, some long, some short, and then coming back to an office environment. What have I learned with that traveling back and forth? Shinzen has all sorts of senior students, and I'm one who has a lot of engagement with Buddhism, so that's something that will be a touchstone of this program. Hopefully that's something you're comfortable with. The utility that I work for, there's a lot of field workers. So this is mostly oriented towards cubicle office computer kind of work. If you do other sort of work, hopefully some of this will apply as well. I'm also not going to be talking about official classes and groups in the workplace where the corporation provides it, or there's an informal sitting group, or maybe you lead a group. This is mostly going to be focused on you being responsible for your own practice, not a group setting. Also, I'm hoping that you all have a headset or an earbud, or can turn your phone onto speakerphone and hear it, because my intention is that we'll do some walking and also that we'll do some mindfulness while sitting at a computer. I think Choshin, so we'll start the content now. I think Choshin sent out the picture of 2 axes that I created a while back. And to me, that's the essence of mindfulness. It's the essence of meditation. It's the essence of Buddhism. It's the essence of spirituality. In that, perhaps you have it in front of you, or can remember, having looked at it, there's one axis, which I call the x-axis. And that's, are you getting what you want in life? Are you eating your favorite food, or are you eating some food that you really don't like and kind of wish that you weren't eating? Are people praising you and saying how great you are, or people saying, I don't like them? Are you feeling healthy and you just had a great workout, or are you sick and injured? Do you like how society's going and how the environment's going, or are you feeling uneasy about what you see in politics? Do you have a lot of money in the bank? Do you look at your bank statement and get stressed out? So in Buddhism, that's called the 8 worldly winds, in that they come and go. We all have both in our life. You know, classically in Buddhism, eventually we're all going to get sick and ill and die. And so the low side of the x-axis happens for everyone. The most powerful and the most miserable of people. All have pleasures in life, all have displeasures in life. But as Shinzen likes to say, there's a way in which we can be happy independent of circumstances. And that to me is spirituality. That to me is the meditative endeavor. I call this the x-axis. How closed, fighting against, arguing with reality, checked out, deadened, unaware are we? How much friction and viscosity do we have? Are we open, allowing, and loving of reality? Present, aware, and mindful? Do we have a fluid and open experience of self? Can we love completely and let go completely? Can we be unconstricted and spacious? Now, for most people, as I'm sure you know, the x-axis and the y-axis co-vary, i.e., people are more open when they're happier and more closed when they're unhappy. But there's some people, as I'm sure you know, are closed pretty much all the time, happy or unhappy. Some people are open all the time, and I think that's our goal. And so the question on the table is, can we have that high on the y-axis experience of openness and allowing, even when producing deliverables on a computer, even when under pressure to deliver a project, or even when bored? So that's what we'll be exploring. How do we do that? As you probably know, mindfulness in the workplace is something that's sweeping the nation. I think that's great. I remember I listened to a talk by the pop psychologist John Bradshaw years ago, and he talked about many people go to therapy or they develop spiritual practices, and they get some inner illumination in their own life. And maybe they spiritualize their relationship or their exercise habits, or maybe even their relationship with their kids or their parents. But the workplace is often one of the last places to get transformed for many people, and it's often a crucial place for people to feel more of a sense of aliveness, more of a sense of depth. I think there's two ways to approach this. One is that there are people in the workplace that don't necessarily want to meditate. They don't even, maybe they have a vague interest, like, sure, I'll try it. But it's not really a self-motivated thing. I've heard Shinzen talk about how in ancient Japan, people didn't necessarily want to meditate any more than they do now, your common person. So the Zen monks would sneak it into flower arranging or archery or tea ceremony or swordsmanship. Zen and the art of. So the idea is, let's get present with something that you already want to do. So I think there's people who are sneaking mindfulness into the workplace. And they say, hey, it'll help you. Stress reduction, less illness, make you more efficient, emotional intelligence, more clear communication and listening and empathy, better team cooperation, more patience, more focus and clarity in getting in the zone, more creativity and innovation and mental agility, more higher energy levels and productivity, more employee satisfaction and happiness, less intentional absenteeism. So they talk to HR people and they say, hey, look at all these positive return on investments we can give you. Let's try this out. I like to think of it as like there's two islands, right? And you're on the mainland. And you see the first island, people are drinking Mai Tais and they're having a pool party and it looks so much fun. And you're on the mainland, it's kind of boring, and so you say to the boat captain, hey, I want to go to that island. And the boat captain's like, sure, I'll take you to that island. But the boat captain doesn't tell you, we're not actually going to stop on the first island, or if we do, we're not going to be there long. On the next island, hidden behind the first island, is a temple. And that's actually where we're going. You might not even know it till you get to the first island. You're like, this is fun, but a little boring. Hey, I see that other island. People look pretty serene there. Maybe I could try that out. But I think there's another way that people approach mindfulness in the workplace, or some sort of sense of liberation in the workplace, and that's people that are already motivated. And I'm going to assume that's most of you. People who have a practice but want to feel more of that practice while working. We don't all have time to go live in a cave in the Himalayas or sit by a tranquil pool. One of my Zen teachers likes to talk about city Buddha, which is being aware in the middle of a city. In Buddhism, there's the image of a lotus in muddy water, which is even surrounded with all the tangles and impurities of daily life. How can we have the purity of a lotus? How can we have that openness and that pure love? So I assume people on this call have a pretty strong practice, and you know that daily life constantly is presenting us with a doorway to transcendence. And the key is to be able to notice what those doorways are and walk through them. Here's a quote by the teacher U Silananda, the Burmese teacher. For those who have experience and whose concentration has matured to some extent, any place is the right place for meditation. Here's one by Rick Fields, a Buddhist pioneer in America. When we pay attention, whatever we are doing, whether it be cooking, cleaning, or making love, is transformed and becomes part of our spiritual path. We begin to notice details and textures that we never noticed before. Everyday life becomes clearer, sharper, and at the same time, more spacious. And here's one by our friend Shinzen. The whole point of monastic training is not to learn to be comfortable in a monastery, but to learn to be comfortable anywhere. My first teacher kept a picture by his desk. It was entitled Buddha Leaving the Mountain. It was an important icon for him. So perhaps you've heard of Shinzen's idea of a challenge sequence, which is to take a technique, one that resonates with you, and maintain it through a sequence of progressively more challenging activities. You stay with each stage until you've more or less mastered it, and then you move on to the next. So one that he has published online, perhaps you've seen this, is starting with lying down, then seated upright with eyes closed. Let's say being able to track your breath. Can you do it lying down? Can you track your breath seated upright with your eyes closed? Can you track your breath seated upright with your eyes open? Can you track your breath standing? How about slowly walking? How about walking fastly? How about walking in a sensorily impactful environment, the city, say? How about while doing simple exercise? Next, more complicated exercise. Then washing dishes. Then cooking a simple meal. Then cooking a more complicated meal. Then carrying on a vacuous conversation. Or we could say being at a business meeting that you don't really need to have input on. You can just vaguely stay tuned in. How about watching low-impact TV and then emotional high-impact TV or movie, carrying on a substantive conversation, and then carrying on a really emotionally charged conversation. So many of our mindfulness techniques are easier, lower down on that spectrum, and harder the higher up we get. So working at a computer is pretty high up on that spectrum, at least it is for me. Shinzen says the goal is to be as high at the end of that spectrum, or as clear as you are at the beginning. That's a pretty tall order. But we can build up gradually, and as Shinzen says, it's a homework assignment we have our whole life to turn in. So what sort of techniques can we do to be mindful in the workplace? I think the classic teaching, the classic thing that people work with is taking a little break. No matter how busy we are, we actually have time to take a little break usually. It can be a 15-second break. It can be a 2-minute break. So I have notes prepared. Some of this I'm reading from notes if it's not obvious. So I'm going to read you a quote by the teacher Alan Wallace from his book, The Attention Revolution. However busy we may be or think we are, no one is paying us enough to have our work demand on our minds every single moment of the day. Even in the midst of work, we can take off 15 seconds here and 60 seconds there to balance attention by quickly and quietly focusing on our breath. Our eyes can be open and we can sit quietly focusing on our breath. Our eyes can be open and we can sit quietly for just a few moments without calling attention to ourselves. We can do this in the workplace, when standing in line in the grocery store, or while waiting at a stoplight. There are many brief occasions from the time we get up in the morning until we fall asleep at night where we can season our day with a sprinkling of mindfulness of breathing. And each time we do it, we may immediately feel the soothing effects on our bodies and minds. In this way, we can begin to integrate the qualities of awareness that we cultivate during meditation with the awareness that we bring to our activities in the world throughout the day. And here's someone named Hwasan Sunim. I have no idea who that is, except that apparently he writes columns for Huffington Post. And he wrote, we can have rest stops along the path of our workday, places where we can cleanse, recharge, and refocus our minds and our bodies through meditation. In this way, our workday does not become one long draining withdrawal of our physical and mental energy. In our journey through the day, we plant oases along the way, private havens of stillness, clarity, and revitalization. Each time we take a moment during our workday to meditate, the deep calm, energy, and illumination created by our short meditation infuses the task that we perform immediately afterwards. These short meditation sessions resonate like the intermittent gongs of a temple bell, reverberating into and softening and brightening our facial expressions, the light in our eyes, our physical bearing, the sound of our voice, and the tempo of our movement. Daily life takes on a musical quality, an organic rhythm as we alternate between stillness and motion, silence and speech, internal contemplation, and external behavior. This cycling between meditation and action reveals itself to be an echo, reflection, and extension of the natural rhythm of life at work in our bodies as we inhale and exhale, as our heart beats and rests, and as our mind awakens and sleeps. We become artists as we learn to improvise in our weavings of meditation and work. And what we begin to create each morning is a day of profoundly meaningful, rewarding life. A day of beauty and grace that comes shining through the endless frenzy of modern life. That's pretty poetic and maybe aspirational, but I like reading it. It feels good to read. So I notice for myself, I often have to, when I have the idea of taking a break during the day, deal with feelings that I don't have time to take a break. There's an agitated, jittery, I got to be productive, tripping ahead sort of energy. I also often have a feeling like I don't deserve a break, like I got to be productive, I haven't got enough done, and now I'm a fraud unless I get more done soon. That voice says, don't take a break, you don't deserve a break, you have too much to do, just got one more thing done, skip this break and maybe you can take the next one. So I've noticed if I don't take breaks and I get to work, I'm pretty sharp and alert and motivated for an hour or two. And then I lose steam and things start to be a drag. And what I've noticed is my mind's going to take a break anyway, consensually or non-consensually. It's going to do some fun, non-productive stuff, but it might not be that wholesome. It might be, I told myself I wouldn't, play a game on my phone, and here I'm doing it again. But my mind's like, well, if you're going to slave drive me for hours on end, I'm not into that. So I think one challenge is to check into those agitated sensations or those unworthy sensations. Why are they driving me? Where in my body are they? How can I make friends with them and give them some space, but not let them grab the wheel? And I also think it takes a certain degree of discipline and a certain degree of self-love and valuing myself to take regular breaks. It's something that keeps me centered and calm, engaged, energized, and fresh. I remember I was going through a breakup, and I was all of a sudden taking on all sorts of hardcore practices, quitting bad habits and exercising a lot. And I said to one of my best friends, okay, here's everything I'm doing. What more do you think that I could be doing right now? I want your input. I know you know me well. I know you're a wise human. And he said, you know what, man? I think you're doing a lot. I think what would really add to your life is more yin, more relaxation, some downtime, some self-care. And I think that's true in the workplace. If we charge hard all day, it's going to be a negative experience, and I don't think we're as productive, at least I'm not, as when we take some breaks. A similar idea that takes discipline and self-love is to leave work when it's time to leave, to not get a few more things done or feel like I'm behind or I really owe the corporation another hour, but to set some boundaries there. So perhaps some of you have heard of the Pomodoro technique. It's something I've experimented with in my life and found to be pretty wonderful. It was created by an Italian person. You can research it online if interested. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. He had a little kitchen timer shaped like a tomato on his desk. So he would set it for 25 minutes. He experimented with different time lengths. And what he found was about 25 minutes of work, followed by a break of about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, doing something non-mental. Something, it could be meditation, but it could be folding laundry or doing dishes, making some food, stretching or exercising, or just lying down. Something where you're not thinking the way you are, say, when you're on a computer. And then every fourth break for 15 minutes. And he found that increases productivity. So this is something that some time efficiency experts recommend as a time frame for taking breaks. Then there's the question, what's going to remind you to take a break? I remember when I was at the kitchen of the Tassajara Zen Monastery in California here, we would be busting butt, getting stuff done, chopping. Before the meals where all the monks ate, it was showtime. And the head of the kitchen would randomly ring a bell. And often at the time you least could afford to stop. And the idea was you would freeze in place and just listen to the bell until you couldn't hear it anymore. You're allowed to put down something heavy or close the oven door, but besides that, freeze in place. And so that was a pretty wonderful practice in that we'd be in the middle of go, 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 and as Shinzen likes to say, stop on a dime, just tune in. And I think it created a greater sense of presence and a greater sense of, I don't know how to say it, like richness of the moment at the times when no one was ringing the bell. I remember when I was younger, I used to like listening to Howard Stern. I think most people into meditation might not have the best feelings about Howard Stern, but I liked it. And he has a sidekick named Robin. And, it was sort of the paradigm of the raucous morning show where everyone's talking shit and making fun of each other. And I remember the rest of the morning crew, one morning they said, Robin, what's that on your wrist? What's your watch doing? And it turns out after every 15 minutes her watch would buzz. And she said, it's to remind me to stay present with all you hooligans. And they started giving her a hard time about it, but I listened the next few days and no one gave her a hard time about it again. I think after the show went off the air that day, she probably said, this is important for my mental health. Don't give me crap about it. So, there's someone in an environment you wouldn't expect who had a little mindfulness bell on her watch. Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village monastery in South France, on their computers for decades now, they've had apps that pop up every, say, 15 minutes, say, hey, tune in. And I think they had to get those customized made, but now there's many off-the-shelf apps for phones and computers that will pop up on a given time. And I think many people are aware of apps like Headspace and now Shinzen's Bright Mind that provide guided meditations. There's also a lot of simple apps that just ring a bell after a given time frame. But now there's apps too that will every once in a while say, hey, time to tune in. You can go back to your computer in a little bit. As an aside, there's also apps, I haven't experimented with them, but I've heard of them, that will track how much time you spend on time wasters, on, say, games. So all sorts of aids to staying mindful and productive and on purpose these days. I feel blessed in that the company that I work for has software installed called RSI Guard. I guess it's something a lot of companies have. But I'm amazed at how on point the RSI Guard is. Like how often its message is a perfect message, something that if a senior mindfulness teacher had come up with it, that's about what I would expect. I wrote down over the last month or two some of the things that my RSI Guard pops up every once in a while and says, and sort of it demands that I take a 15-minute break. It'll flash until I stop typing. It says, take your mind off what you're working on. Are you in any discomfort? Remember to breathe. Are you sitting with a healthy lower back curve? Relax a bit. Are your shoulders relaxed or raised? See if you can relax them. Take a breath and think about how you are working on your computer. Look away from the screen and blink a few times. Notebook computers are convenient, but make sure to notice your posture. If you feel discomfort, take a break now. Notice your posture relative to your computer. Take a deep breath and think about how you are working on a computer. Do you feel tense while working? Take a deep breath and close your eyes for a few seconds. Those are pretty wonderful. I feel blessed that my company provides that for me. I mean, the intention is, I guess, was started to not have repetitive stress injuries, but I think that with those messages, it's moved beyond that towards taking care of our mental health and our emotional health and our spiritual health. So, if you're able to, I invite you to find a computer and maybe open something that's actually worked for you. Your email client or a spreadsheet you're working on, something you're working on writing, photos you're working on editing, whatever. I'll give you a few minutes to get settled with that, if you're able. If you don't have that, maybe you can get on your phone. Okay, great. So I invite you to sit, just looking normal, just as if you were having a normal working session. And what do you notice in your body and your breath? How is it different from listening to a lecture on mindfulness? How is it different from meditating? Is there something that's the same, that stays the same no matter what state you're in? Maybe start working a little bit. Maybe get into it a little bit. Maybe even to the point of losing yourself a little bit in the work. Great. Okay, now I invite you to look at your computer and know that you're looking. Those of you who are familiar with Shinzen's practice of see out. It's mindful looking. Be aware that you're seeing colors and shapes, textures. Be aware that your brain is creating the experience of seeing. Great. Now, let's keep working a little bit. Now, I invite you to look away from the computer and to see out. Be aware that you're seeing. You know, they say people get nearsighted if they stare at something 3 feet away all day. That's how you lose your long-term vision, your long-range vision. If you just stare at books, computers, and close-up faces all day. So it's recommended to keep your eyesight sharp, to look at something 100 feet away, or for you Canadians, 30 meters away. If you're able to do that, something across the room or out the window. Now look back at your computer. What changes looking back at your computer? Keeping the practice of see out going. Being aware that you're seeing. Now take a break and look off at something as far away as you can see. Again, really getting into the texture of seeing. Great. Perfect. Now, let's get back to our computers a little bit. Let's do a little bit of, whatever it is that you're doing. Hopefully you're doing something real, like actually starting an email or editing your to-do list. Okay, well, let's take a break and do a body scan. So I invite you Check in with your scalp. Do you feel any sensation there? If so, can you open to it? Fully experience it. Check in with your forehead, your cheeks, your face, your jaw. Any sensation there? Can you, as Shinzen says, penetrate that? Can you saturate awareness into that? How about your eyes, your mouth? How's your neck feel? Can you drop your shoulders? What are you noticing in your upper arms, your forearms, your hands? Any sensation in your chest, your back, your lower back? How's your belly, the breath in your belly? Is it soft and full? Is it tight? How about your hips, the bottom of your torso, your thighs, your calves, your feet? What do you notice as you scan through your body like that? Okay, now back to the computer. Okay, let's do a quicker body scan. Head and scalp, neck, shoulders, arms, hands, chest, upper back, belly, lower back, hips, thighs, calves, feet. All right, back to the computer. All right, let's do another slow body scan. What are you noticing in your feet right now? What about your calves? Can you open to and allow the sensation in your thighs? Your hips and the lower part of your torso? Can you relax your belly, as if you get a soft belly, as if you were safe, as if things were okay? Checking in with your lower back, your upper back, your chest. Maybe letting go with your hands, relaxing your forearms, your elbows. Relaxing your upper arms. Checking in with your shoulders, maybe inviting them to drop. Checking in with your neck. Maybe if your neck's tense, see if you can bring your ears more in line with your shoulders. Balance your head on your neck a little easier. Relaxing your mouth, relaxing your eyes, your jaw. Seeing what you notice in your cheeks, your temple, your forehead, and your scalp. Great. Now let's go back to our computer work. Now let's try something a little funky. See if you can do a body scan while continuing to work. Could be a quick body scan, could be slower, either speed. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. So, body scans aren't something I think Shinzen does, but I know he has a lot of experience with them. He's done a lot of work with the Goenka lineage of Vipassana, which that's their main practice. It's also sort of the most common practice in America, or one of the most common, since it's a core practice for mindfulness-based stress reduction. I think it's a great practice to do during little micro breaks at work, because you're comprehensively exploring the whole body. You're checking in with even parts that might not speak up very often, like the upper back. You're noticing any tension that may be grab your attention and be compelling or subtle. And as Shinzen likes to say, subtle is significant. Shinzen, I think I heard this story from Shinzen. Uba-kin was Goenka's teacher. For those of you that don't know, S.N. Goenka was a Burmese businessman of Indian ethnicity who had debilitating headaches. He'd made a lot of money, but he had poor health, and he went to the great meditation master Uba-kin and said, "Can you help me?" And Uba-kin said, "Yeah, well, you have to take these 10-week classes, 10-week retreats." And Goenka said, "Well, do I have to?" And he did it, and he got really into it and dedicated his life to it. And he brought, he's one of the people most responsible for bringing Buddhism back to India. And he's opened meditation centers all over the world. And so maybe 250,000 people a year go through one of his 10-week courses somewhere in the world. And his retreats are probably the most popular meditation retreats in the world. And the main thing they do is body scans. And they start you out quickly. And, they start you out slowly. It takes about an hour to do a full body scan. And at the end of the 10-day retreat, the hope is that you could do a body scan in 30 seconds. So Uba-kin, this teacher of Goenka's, he was the accountant general of Burma, as well as 3 other ministerships. And he was also a meditation master and teacher to thousands. So he was someone that understood the balance between meditation practice, mindfulness, spaciousness, and having a job with a lot of responsibility. He was a man of, I guess, impeccable moral character, which means the government relied on him for a lot. And there were purges and coups, and government ministers were getting shot regularly, but he carried on because everyone trusted him. So apparently, what he would do fairly often is he would get up in the middle of contentious meetings and stare at the Irrawaddy River that goes through Rangoon. And people thought he was just spacing out or thinking about what was under discussion. But apparently what he said he was actually doing is doing body scans, especially in the middle of difficult arguments. His body would get tense. He was a human being. That's how emotions work. And by scanning through his body and noticing where his musculature had gotten tight, and just sort of hovering there for a bit, getting intimate with it, allowing it to, as Buddhists say, self-liberate, allowing it to open, he would come back to the discussion with more spaciousness, more presence, less driver sensations. And so I like that story. I think it's an example of body scans getting someone back in the game with more resources. Psychologists sometimes talk about age regressions. And most of us go through age regressions many times a day, where all of a sudden we're just a simple animal or a simple child. Something emotional happens, or we see someone on the commute vehicle that's a little scary, and all of a sudden we just have this instinctive fear, and our adult minds go away for a second. Or we finish some sort of project at work, and there's just this elation that's just primal, and we're not really thinking rationally. Age regression. So when we're age regressed, we don't have all of our faculties available to us. And a mindfulness practice can get us back to the point where we're available to other people. We're available to the moment. We're available to what our work is asking of us from a stage where we're 5 years old for a little bit. So another thing we can do is walking meditation. Some of you may know that walking is the second most common posture after sitting. I noticed in Asian monasteries that I've stayed at, they almost all have well-worn walking meditation paths. There are Western people who walking meditation is pretty much their whole practice. Walking meditation is great for energizing us when we're sluggish, which can be important during the workday because, we're expected to be on for 8 hours, and there are times where the mind does not cooperate. It says, I'm pretty sleepy right now and don't feel like getting much done. So the basic idea with walking meditation is to feel the soles of our feet and to be aware of our thoughts, like clouds in the sky. Actually, come to think of it, there's a lot of different ways to do walking meditation. That's the way I do it. It's sort of like a concentration meditation. Just like people might people focus their minds on the breath or on a mantra. The way I do walking meditation is to try to bring my full attention to my feet. Shinzen has a story about, I guess this happened about 100 years ago. Someone went to a Burmese meditation master and said, "Hey, master, I really want to practice mindfulness, but I don't have the time. I have to be in the rice fields all day." And the teacher said, "Well, how much do you have to think about when you do your rice farming?" And the guy said, "Well, not much. I mean, I've been doing it for decades. I kind of can do it at my sleep." And the teacher said, "Well, feel the soles of your feet in the rice paddy as you walk around. Try and just feel the full texture. Try to let awareness saturate the experience of your feet striking the ground." And so the story goes, the guy got fully enlightened within a few years. So it's a powerful practice. In my current job, what I often do is I get up from my computer and I walk to the other end of the hallway and back. And that's about a city block and a half. And I've developed sort of a philosophy for myself. Anytime it even crosses my mind to do that, just to get up and do it. And that's a wonderful practice. I come back to my computer refreshed. And usually I'm buzzing with thoughts on the way out, and then like on the way back in, I'm actually tuned into the feet. It takes me a while to drop thinking and actually feel my feet. I had a different job where I would walk around the building. I would actually get out of the building and walk around it. So those are examples of intentionally going for a walk during the workday. And again, it's a mindfulness practice, but it's also an energizing practice. It's getting in motion. It's not just being in front of the computer. In my company, I'm pretty lucky in that we have standing desks. We can elevate our desks, and it's kind of the same idea. It's kind of being in our bodies more, energizing more, not just sitting all day. Some people will intentionally walk a little bit. They'll park their car in a distant parking spot so that they have to walk to the office for a little bit longer. And that's a time to feel the feet, or, there's other things one can do. Tune into the breath, or, a lot of Shinzen's techniques. You could focus on thoughts. You could hear in and see in. I remember I worked with someone once, and he said he did not keep a cup of water on his desk. Said he would have to get up and walk to the water fountain a number of times each day and kind of drop thinking and tune into body, tune into what's happening right now. Same idea. There's also walking functionally, walking to lunch, walking to a meeting. My company's general office has 2 buildings, so we're often walking to meetings to the other building. So those are some times to check in with how walking is, or to do one-pointed concentration on the soles of the feet. So the saying goes, when walking meditation, even if we're doing functional walking to get us somewhere, the suggestion is let go of the destination. Someone said, if you're really into getting to your final destination, that's death. So what's your hurry? Enjoy the ride. So that's a context or a paradigm to hold for walking meditation when you're actually going for lunch or walking from your commute vehicle to your desk. All right, so hopefully you all have a headset or an earbud, or can put your phone on speakerphone. and we can do some walking meditation. Perhaps this is a practice that you're already familiar with. Maybe it's not. Either way, my intention is that we'll do this for a little longer than we were doing the body scans. This will actually be a little bit more of a practice drop-in. So if you're a little saturated with words, here's your chance to feel your body a little bit more. All right. For me, something crucial with walking meditation is posture. And just like in sitting practice, we want to have an extended spine. I don't want to say straight spine because a healthy spine actually has a little bit of a curve to it. But can you stand in a way that your hips are on top of your feet, your ankles, your shoulders are stacked on top of your hips, and your ears, your head is stacked on top of your shoulders, such that it doesn't take a lot of muscular effort to hold yourself up. You can kind of release to gravity and balance holds you up. So that's an important part of walking meditation for me. So hopefully you can take that posture and perhaps find a place where you can walk back and forth. All right. Now I invite you to stand at attention, perhaps with that extended spine, lifting up with the crown of your head. I invite you to take a couple intentionally deep breaths. As you do, transition from thinking about meditation to actually tuning into this moment. Just this moment, just this experience. Notice anything happening in the rest of your body besides your feet. Notice any thoughts you have. What's the speed of your mind at this moment? Any emotions? I invite you to gently bring your attention to your feet. Start by taking a step. You start walking slowly and taking another step. Taking another step. Just as with any concentration meditation, I invite you to continuously bring your attention back to your feet. If you're having thoughts, visual or auditory conversational, if you're having emotions, obviously you have to see out to navigate the room and hear out to hear my voice. All that said, as much as possible, let everything that's not your feet be like clouds in the sky or wisps of vapor. Let it be. But keep bringing your attention back to how your feet feel as you walk, taking slow, measured steps. If you get to the end of the hallway, the end of the room, stop for a bit. Slowly, mindfully turn around. I invite you to try and register as much information as possible about the sensation in each foot as it moves. Try to have an unbroken stream of awareness. See if you can be aware of the distinct components of moving, and see that each component has even smaller subcomponents. The lifting, the moving, the first touch of the foot landing back down, the placing of your weight onto the foot. Each part has its own distinct beginning, middle, and end. See how much information you can drink in, but the subtleties of walking. Keeping it slow for now. Meditation retreat slow. We'll walk normal, everyday, fast in a little bit. But for now, keeping it slow. As with all concentration techniques, all sorts of things may pull your mind away. The idea is let those things be. Let them dance their dance. Maybe you can say hello to them. Give them a bit of your time. But when you're able, gently bring your awareness back to your feet. See if you can balance doing and non-doing. The non-doing of letting everything be with the doing of focusing on your feet. Just the minimum effort to pull your attention back. See if you can put some radical trust into your feet. But that's all you need right now. All your concerns and personality and plans and emotions, they're all great, and they'll be waiting for you at the end of the meditation. For now, see if you can put your trust into simply your feet. Invite you as best you're able, just let everything else go. Like opening your hand and dropping something you're gripping tightly to. Being aware when the foot begins to rise. Again, when it hits the ground. The sweep of tactile sensations on the sole, lifting off the ground and as it touches down onto the ground. If you find yourself bored or your mind drifting, rather than escaping away from the feet into thought, escape into the feet, into greater texture, greater noticing, greater, higher resolution of what you're perceiving and experiencing. Again, keeping it slow for now. Again, we're looking to feel a little more information than usual. Higher resolution, greater intimacy with the experience of walking. Right, now let's try speeding it up a little. So at the speed you would walk to the coffee shop or from your commute vehicle to your desk. Now, what's similar about this and what's different? Again, walking back and forth in your hallway or your room, or perhaps you're outside. Here's a quote by a famous Zen Roshi, Hakuin Yasutani. Keep the eyes rested on a point about 2 yards in front of the feet. Walk in such a way that the foot sinks into the floor, first the heel and then the toes. Walk calmly and steadily with poise and dignity. The walking should be done with awareness, and the mind should be taut as you concentrate. And maybe you could imagine that you're walking from your desk to a meeting, or whatever's realistic for you. This is actually the workday. And here you're having a different experience of walking. You're bringing that dual awareness, that added dimension of the y-axis, creating some spaciousness through the grounding anchor of the feet. So even at full speed, if you can feel the tensing and releasing of muscles, pressure, release of pressure from the ground and air, muscular contraction and release. What feels hard, what feels soft. Feeling the instant your toe rises. Feeling the instant your heel touches. Feeling the beginning of your ankle swing, middle of your ankle swing, and the end. Feeling all the little numerous subcomponents, the tiny movements and jerks of what it is to take a step. Again, imagining if this was the workday, and you're having a different experience of grounding yourself with foot awareness. Letting your awareness merge with the walking and become the walking. All right, that's great. Coming back to stillness. Noticing whatever you notice, how that exercise is reverberating within you. And coming back to seated. So I just noticed a text from Cho that there's apparently been a purring sound between me speaking. Okay. Oh, it's all quiet now. Okay, great. I changed headsets. Apparently it was the headset I was using that was creating a purring sound. So I feel bad hearing that. I hope that wasn't distracting for anyone. But glad to read that this headset is apparently technically more clear. That's what we aim for here: concentration, equanimity, and clarity. Okay. Let me check my notes here. Yeah, maybe this is maybe that's enough information for now. Actually, yeah, there's one more topic I want to cover before we transition. And that is specific activities being like mindfulness bells. I talked about setting up software that will ring every once in a while and say, hey, it's time to take a break. You can, of course, keep your own eyes on the clock, but I think having something that pops up or a timer that counts down works even better in terms of taking regular breaks. But then there's things that happen in a regular pacing during the day that can be little mindfulness bells suggesting that we take a break. Here's a quote by a local Buddhist teacher, Andrea Fella. She says, to facilitate cultivating mindfulness in daily life, it is helpful to choose some projects to bring mindfulness to. If we try to bring mindfulness to our whole day all at once, we're setting ourselves up to fail. A little dire, but gets the idea across. So some classic things that people use as mindfulness bells to take little micro breaks are coffee breaks, or the time that people walk to the bathroom. A classically recommended one is when you call someone on the phone and you're waiting for them to pick up, to tune into the breath or notice, hear and see in, to notice your thinking. When the phone rings, using that as a moment to check in. What's your body feeling? What are your driver sensations at this moment? Having that be a mindfulness bell. I reboot my work computer about once a month. But, if you have reason to reboot, or if you come in on Monday and turn your computer back on, that time that the computer's taking to boot back up, sometimes my feeling is, come on. I got stuff to do. Got to check my email. But, how can you create being high on the y-axis at that moment? How can you tune into the moment and create some space around it? How can you become so intimate with your driver sensations that they self-liberate? Another time is making food. Sometimes it's nice to say hi to your coworker in the kitchen break room while chopping your lunch. Sometimes it's nice just to feel your hands while chopping. Notice the practice of seeing whatever it is you're chopping. I think waiting online for lunch or for coffee, again, that might be a time where the sensation of come on can come up, but how can you be just there with waiting online? I think bringing awareness to the soles of the feet can be anchoring when waiting online. There's also going to the bathroom. Don't bring your phone in. Maybe just sit there in silence. Maybe some of you have heard of Master Dogen. He's what brought one of the two main lineages of Zen to Japan from China. He's considered, I guess, one of the greatest prose writers in Japanese history and greatest philosopher, although a religious philosopher. So he's much revered in Japan, and he wrote books about the monastery, and he said the most important place in the monastery is the meditation hall. And then the Buddha hall, the place where prayers and chanting happens. and then the kitchen. And the fourth most important place in the monastery is the bathroom, because it's a time to be present. All sorts of issues of control and release happen there. So it's a place where mindfulness can happen, but not if you're on your phone. So those are all things you might want to experiment with using as mindfulness bells, as times where you habitually check in. Have it be something you do each time as a practice. So here's something by my teacher Gil, a little quote. As in meditation, it is possible to develop greater presence and awareness in our daily lives. Some people find it useful to have cues throughout the day that remind them to notice what is happening in the present, i.e., what they are doing, feeling, and thinking. A common cue is the phone ringing. Rather than rushing to immediately answer the phone, the ringing is a prompt to be mindful. It's also a great way to prepare for the phone conversation. Some people use walking through doorways as a mindfulness cue. Whenever they walk through a doorway into a different room, they notice and pay attention to what is happening within themselves and in the new room. Waiting for traffic lights to turn green can be another common cue for a bit of mindfulness. Suggestion. Number 1, pick a simple daily activity that takes several minutes: brushing your teeth, unloading the dishwasher, making a bed. Bring a simple light mindfulness to the activity. Notice your posture, your mood, whether your mind is reacting to the activity, how your breathing is. Pick something that happens regularly in your day and use it as a mindfulness bell, i.e., closing a window on a computer, opening a door. It's helpful to pick an activity that you initiate rather than one that is a response to something in your environment. For example, opening a door is an activity that you usually initiate. Answering the telephone is a response to something in the environment. Another way to help bring mindfulness into your daily life is to put mindful reminders around your house or your office. Choosing strategic places to put a small note to remind you to pay attention, especially if there is a place or activity in which it is difficult to remember to be mindful. So I remember when I was living in monasteries, we would have little mindfulness verses that we would do before certain things, like taking a shower or eating. Well, we'd have a lot of verses before eating, but before we worked. And those were little times to tune in, to remind us that, to hold things in the context of getting things done on the x-axis, but also that we're there to be high on the y-axis, open, spacious, with a loving heart, intimate with our experience, drinking in the details, concentration, clarity, and equanimity. All right, so we have 10 minutes before the mid-program break. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions about what I've presented so far, or your own experiences with it, or anything else that you'd like to share. So Cho, if you could put us into Q&A. The line is open.
Just a reminder to hit *6 to unmute yourself and *6 again when you're finished speaking to Adam.
Hi, Adam. I was wondering if you could speak about multitasking versus single tasking a bit. That's kind of like a popular debate amongst productivity people, and
Great.
It seems like we kind of did a little bit of that with the body scan while
working,
just for a moment. And it was, I couldn't tell if I was simultaneously doing it or just flipping back very quickly, which is, I think it was the latter more, because it was, I kind of caught it was like I was just catching myself, like, oh no, I'm all in the work, oh no, I'm all in the body, like, and it was kind of more stressful than,
So, well, I will say something about that. I've never done a body scan while working on a computer before. I put that in my notes as something, and it was actually harder than I thought to actually tell my attention to go to one place in my body while also trying to use my mind. I think one thing I've done over the years is actually free-floating awareness in the body, and that seems to work better while working on a computer. That said, so when you said it was actually a little bit of your attention was pulled all over the place, mine was too. But so it seems like you're bringing up dual awareness or multitasking. That's actually a subject I have for the second half of the program. I have some notes about that. But I'm curious your experiences with it or your thoughts about it. It seems like it's something that you've experimented with or are curious about. So have you, in the workplace, done mindfulness techniques while working, or is that just something that you've thought to try?
Yeah, I guess, I do try when I can to kind of keep like some semblance of a zoomed out layer like around everything. But I guess also, I mean, it just seems like certain tasks just, they just kind of, it like requires like having like one cog out just kind of like makes it not work. And but then again, I was also starting to feel like, is it that I'm staying out, or is it just that the work is expanding in my view? So it's like, it's hard to, I was like, am I actually something that's zooming in and out, or is it these things are here, like the work is already here and it's just taking up more space in this static view? So it's not that I'm getting lost, it's just the work is...
So let me see if I understand. When you work, you try and have a greater awareness. You said zoom out, which for me, using a mindfulness technique while working is often a somatic thing, my breath or my body, but I guess zoom out could also include speed of thinking, or I don't know, you can explain. But then there are times where your work seems to take over your entire consciousness, and you wonder, is that correct me if I'm trying to understand you here. So there are times that you feel like maybe you dropped your mindfulness, or maybe you feel like it's just the nature of certain tasks at work to actually take over your entire awareness and make it pretty much impossible to keep mindfulness going. Is that accurate?
I think so. I'd say it gets to a point where I'm like, should I continue fighting for this kind of dual position of wide and narrow, or should I just go all in on the task and just kind of forget about trying to keep this global view? Like,
right.
Yeah, I think that's... I mean, I find it valuable to try to keep that outside view as kind of like a practice, but I think for the majority of the time I find it's kind of also beneficial and more useful to just kind of focus in completely. And just kind of throw everything into the one, almost treating the work itself as a micro hit.
Well, a few thoughts about that. First off, I want to say, I'm the presenter here, and I have a lot to say on this subject, and I've experimented for 25 years, and I'm a senior student and facilitator in Shinzen System, but I'm also a confused person, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this as fellow practitioners. I'm sort of the quote expert here, but I want to learn from you guys as well, you on the call, and hopefully we'll have more time for you to share the rest of your perspectives in the second half of the call. So I would say that, but to tell you my thought is, I think there's different things in the workplace that have different consequences. There's routine tasks or things that you could kind of catch up with later if you fall a little bit behind. Sometimes experimenting with mindfulness makes you less efficient in the short term. I mean, I'd like to think being mindful makes us more efficient in the long term, given having more free, pliable minds and less emotional constriction during the workday, and that's going to make us more productive. But sometimes as we experiment or engage our practice, we may get a little whacked out and not get as much work done. So sometimes we actually have to get work done. There's a project where there's a tight timeline. People are, in my experience, relying on me, in which case I'm just going to work in the standard way, which is to get unconscious, maybe a little less conscious. And other times there's a little bit more leeway in terms of deliverables, and then I can work with my techniques. I'd also recollect that what did I call it? The 17-part thing, the challenge sequence, which Shinzen calls. You know, I think there are simple things I do during my workday, like copying numbers from one column in Excel to another, that are pretty mindless. And that's a time where it's easier to maintain a dual awareness. But then there's other times where the task is really mental, or it requires the verbal part of my brain. I'm trying to think the exact tone to take in an email reporting on something important to someone a few levels above me. Those are times where it's just more challenging to stay mindful. And my skill level is not at the level at which I can stay conscious the whole time. You know, there's a difference between staying conscious when I'm in a meeting where nothing really pertains to me, I just am sort of required to be there, versus something where people are talking about something that's captivating to me, or versus I'm the one talking and having to, as Shinzen says, manifest a self, you know, deliver something from inside of me to the outside of me, and sort of use my verbal faculties and my analytical thinking to clarify something. So there are times, I think there's times during the workday it's relatively easy to stay conscious, even when thinking or typing or thinking, manipulating concepts, and then there's times where it's harder. And I think, I think it sounds like you've noticed an undulation of the real estate and consciousness between the task at hand and some sort of zoom out meta awareness, and I think that's natural. I think that's what I've noticed in the workday. Cool. Is that relevant to what you brought up?
Yeah, very. Thank you.
Great. All right, well, we're at the hour-and-a-half mark. So, Cho, please remind me if I said I would take phone calls during the break. I don't remember. I'm happy to take phone calls. I'd also be happy to take this time to meditate.
Yes, for the next hour, people can connect with you if they have a question.
Okay, should I give my number out?
They have it.
Okay, great. Well, you have my number. Feel free to call if you have a private question. There'll also be some time for more public discussion in the second half. Other than that, for the next hour, it's your time to practice. If you've never done walking meditation, or if you have, that might be a great thing to practice. Feel free to play with the body scan, or feel free to do any sort of thing you would do on a Saturday, your own techniques, your own practices. And if you have to do the dishes or check the baby, I will not hold that against you. Other than that, I guess I'll talk to some of you on the phone, and the rest of you, I will meet you back here in an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.